Hi, welcome to my quilting beehive. Today I want to talk to you about this beautiful tulip block pattern. It is part of the row by row neighborhood garden quilt, and there's an individual pattern of it where you can make a table runner with a row of tulips that are available in my Etsy shop. Today I just want to go over some tips and tricks to help you make the block quickly and easily. Looking at it, you might find it a little scary because it has a lot of pieces. The key to making this block and having it successful for you is to make sure you label your background pieces, because there are several of them. You'll see I have them labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So when you're cutting your pieces in your pattern, make stacks of them and label them and keep them together. You can buy some of those fancy alphabet marking tags, the alphabetties or other tags if you want. I just used little post-it note papers and I clipped them on with my little clips, and that way I have my pieces in order. I have enough background pieces cut to make 2 more blocks right now. I'm going to make a light pink one and a dark pink one. I have my greens. Those pieces I didn't label because they're obvious what size they are and what shape they are, and there aren't as many of them. But if you label these pieces, it'll make your life a lot easier when you're trying to figure out what you need next as you follow the pattern. Throughout this block, you're going to be making folded corners or snowballed corners to make both the tulip and the leaf pattern parts. So I want to show you 2 ways you can make the folded corners. The first way is by marking your lines, and the other way will be using the folded corner clipper ruler by Creative Grids. I'm going to start by the traditional mark and sew method. For the flowers, you're going to be using piece A, and so I have my stack of piece A pieces and your flower pieces. You're going to need to mark the back of your fabric A squares on the center diagonal. I'm using the Sew Line mechanical pencil. It has a nice fine point. I like the mechanical pencils for that reason. And I'm just carefully drawing a line down the center diagonal. I'm going to mark a couple of these so I can show you where they go and talk to you about how to make your flower block. There are actually 6 of them in the flower block, in the top, the flower part. The hardest part on this is to make sure your white fabric is the right side up, and it's always hard to tell which side's the front and the back on these little tiny pieces with white on white. So mark your 6 pieces, and then you'll be ready to make a flower. And I have my other 6 for my second flower. Okay, now what's important on these is to make sure you have them in the right direction. The one on the left side needs your pieces to be going from the top left to the bottom right, and you're going to put those right on there. And the one on the right side needs to go in the opposite direction, top right to bottom left, just like that. And then your centerpiece, you will put 1 in each direction. You'll have to do 1 at a time when you're sewing so they don't overlap. You'll do 1 this way and the other one will go this way after that. So I'm just going to leave that sitting right there. You'll take these over the sewing machine a little bit and we'll sew them, but next I'm going to show you the way to do it with the Creative Grids folded corner clipper. If you want to make the block using the folded corner clipper by Creative Grids, I'm going to show you how to do that with my light pink version over here. Just like before, you're going to put your fabric right sides together, and you're going to, on the side one, you're going to have 2 pieces. There's my left side, and I'll put 2 on my right side. Make sure you have right sides together, like that. All right, so in our flower, we want this piece to go in this direction. So I am lining it up, and you can see on the left side one, I can line up my 1.5 inch line on the bottom of my square, and I can use my rotary cutter and trim it away. Now it has a perfect 1/4 inch. The ruler is designed with a 1/4 inch built in, so it has the perfect 1/4 inch to sew corner to corner, and I can use my 1/4 inch on my machine to do that. Now when you get to the bottom one, if I lined up my ruler and cut in the same direction, you'll see that I'll be cutting my good piece of fabric. I don't want to cut my pink rectangle apart, so I can't put it in this direction. So I'm going to have to rotate my ruler upside down, turn it around, and you'll see I'll be cutting off just a little triangle, and it lets those pieces be where they need to be. Make sure you have your pattern handy and you're lining it up so they're going in the same direction as what you see in your pattern so they don't end up crooked. I just cut that little piece away. So now when I go to my sewing machine, I don't need to mark my line. I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam on either one. When you go over to your right side one, you're going to start on the top one. You have to have your top ruler sideways so you can cut a little triangle away. And then the bottom one is also sideways because you want to cut that bottom triangle away. And make sure the lines are matching the pattern lines so they're in the right direction every time. When you do your big centerpiece, you're going to start with one, and you'll have to sew that one, and then after that one's done, you'll be able to do the second one. And just look at your pattern of the original flower to make sure your line is in the same direction and you're only cutting off a triangle. You're not going to cut any of your big piece away, just like that. So now these 3 pieces are ready for me to bring to the sewing machine. I can put a pin in them, carry them over there, and I will show you how to sew them. When you get to your sewing machine, you have your pieces laid out. You'll see that the folded corner clipper ones are already cut, and these ones have the lines that are in the same direction. They'll look the same when they're done. It's just a matter of if you're sewing on the line and cutting afterwards, or if you cut first and didn't draw the line. I'm going to start with my right side pieces, and I'm going to just sew that right through. Make sure it's all nice and straight, corners match. When you sew on the line, I actually sew just barely next to the line, and that avoids having the thickness of your thread, making it not line up perfectly. So I don't want to sew, definitely don't want to sew on the left side of the line. You want to sew just barely to the right of the line. A thread's width away, I call it, just a scant little line. And you'll just sew right through. If you wanted to chain piece, you could take your other left side piece, your right side piece, and you could chain piece them through, just always sewing on the triangle side of the line. They go in opposite directions, you can see. And then I'll snip that back one off, and we'll do the last part of it. When I turn it around, I'm going to sew on the triangle side of the line, so this side over here, just right touching the line. And that last one, so I've sewn both sides. Chain piecing saves you a little bit of thread. You know, if you have to pull it out every time, you're wasting a couple inches of thread every time you pull it out. So chain piecing helps keep them in order. And there you go. And then you'll just put them back in place and make sure your left and your right pieces are on the right side. When you're doing the center piece, you will need to sew one side and just like the others, you're just next to the line with the triangle side being the scrap, so you're sewing right next to into the scrap side, and you'll sew that piece. You can't sew both the center ones at the same time because they overlap, so sew one down, and then you can use a rotary cutter, or you can just take a pair of scissors and trim away, leaving about 1/4 inch, and that's your scrap. And then you'll press that and it will make the first piece. I'm just going to finger press it for now. I normally bring it right to my iron. And then you can put your second piece, and they overlap in the middle. That's going to be your 1/4 inch of an overlap that ends up in the seam allowance when you put your pieces together later. So you put that right on there, and you're going to sew your second line. My seam allowance is going towards the white, so I'm going to actually flip this over. No, I can't flip it over. I'm going to turn it around. There we go. So I can sew towards that, and the seam allowance won't get caught in my feed dogs, so I can sew towards them. Whenever I can, I like my seam allowance to go away from the feed dogs so they don't get caught up in there. Sometimes they get bumbled, and you don't want that. So whenever you can turn it, it's a good thing to do. And that's just going to sew right to there. And just like the first one, you can trim away, leaving a 1/4 inch. And when we press that, you'll see you'll have a nice 1/4 inch where they overlapped. That's going to be in your seam allowance where your point ends up, and that will be your center block. And then on your side blocks, just like that, you can trim them with scissors or a rotary cutter if you want to go back to your cutting table. Trim away a little triangle from each end, and you'll find your pieces line up. And your pattern will tell you which way to press them to help make all the seams nest when you're doing that. And then you'll put your pieces together to make your tulip block. Now, if you have the folded corner clipper and you're doing that, they aren't going to need to be cut again because we've already cut them. You're just going to be using a 1/4 inch seam to sew from corner to corner. And so I'm going to bring it to my machine, line it up at that point. And I do have a piece of tape here, but these pieces are too small, but I have a 1/4 inch mark on my machine right here as well to help me keep it straight. And I'm just going to use my 1/4 inch seam. Sew right through. I can go to the next piece and sew it in the opposite direction. Make sure a 1/4 inch seam from where we cut. And we'll separate those and do the next one. And while the pieces are small, it's just simple sewing, straight lines, 1/4 inch seam throughout the block. The most important thing is to make sure your angles are in the right directions. When you do the leaf parts, they have the same technique going into them. You're just going to be using a snowballed corner or a folded corner and sew on the diagonal and cut away the extra. And just like you did on the other one, you'll do one and then we'll have to add the other one afterwards. I'm going to finish these up and then I'll bring them over to the ironing board to show you the ironing. So be sure to follow the pattern in all the parts because it has pressing directions to help you nest the seams. When you're doing the center of the flower, you're going to be pressing toward the background fabric, which I finger pressed that at the machine, but we'll give that a little hit to flatten that one out, and this one as well. So those ones are going towards the background fabric, which means when you press your other ones, you need to press them towards the tulip fabric. So I'm just going to take one, set the seams, and then to make it go towards the tulip fabric, I'm just going to use my fingers to get it in the right direction. And then I'll use the side of my iron to make sure it gets pressed in flat. And then I rotate it around. That seems nice and set, but if I want to make sure I push it towards the tulip fabric, so it's going to go under, away from the background fabric, and then use the side of the iron, and I can put it right on top of the whole piece because it's a nice small piece. And that is going to be the right side of my pink, dark pink tulip. Do the same thing for the left side. So they go towards the tulip fabric. Push it right in there. And the last one. And there we go. And there you have it. When you put those 3 pieces together, you will have your tulip blossom. You're going to add some more pieces. Same techniques go into the sides. We have the triangles being added, the corner here being added to the white rectangle. On this green, you add 2 pieces. You're adding a square and a rectangle to make that one, a skinny stem in between. Put them all together and you'll have this beautiful tulip block. If you go into my Etsy store, you will find the pattern that uses this block. There are 2 different patterns. You'll find Neighborhood Garden, which has a row of tulips in it, as well as other flowers. and you'll find just the tulips by themselves with a butterfly and a cute little table runner. So go into my Etsy store. The links to it are down below in the description, and you can try out these patterns that are available for you. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a lot of fun making these blocks.